Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to our webinar. Uh, you are all are welcome here. Our webinars are free, but if you can donate a little bit to help us with our expenses, it would be very nice. So to donate, just go to our website at rockymountaiнаtheist.ca and you'll find the donate button there. Any amount will help. We are an inclusive community of atheists, humanists, skeptics, and secular freethinkers who welcome people of all backgrounds and identities. We have never had any disruptive attendees, so please let's try and keep our record. Discussion is encouraged as long as everyone shows respect for one another. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A. If you have a question, just use the hand raising icon, and we'll be calling you when you are allowed to ask or when it's your time to ask. And please keep the questions on topic. Quick disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed by speakers and audience members during this event are their own, and they do not reflect official policies, positions, or views of the Rocky Mountain Atheists. Our guest speaker tonight is Jon Michael. We are pleased to have him back. He's a philosopher, computer engineer, ghost hunter, investigator of paranormal claims, and he'll be talking to us about ghost hunting for skeptics. So now I'll stop sharing here, and Jon can start his presentation when he's ready.
Awesome. Can you guys see my
Yes,
screen?
it's perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, I am Jon, and it's actually my second time giving the presentation to you guys. So I won't go too much into who I am, but I will a little bit because I think it's relevant to this presentation. So I grew up in a very religious household. Felt called to be a pastor for the Lord, and I went to seminary for 6 years and dropped out my final semester because in seminary I learned philosophy. Like my degree was history of ideas, and that's actually what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be doing a history of ideas for ghost hunting. I think it's a lost art. It's where you trace the history of an idea. I mean, pretty straightforward and simple, but we don't really do that anymore. It's it can be really insightful to trace like where things come from, like where do people get ideas, where do concepts come from, and we're going to kind of trace ghost hunting as far back as we can. And there's a very interesting point where it gets very seemingly modern, but that's what we're going to do today for like the first half. But yeah, so I learned all about philosophy, critical thinking. I actually took a class called logic, formal logic, informal logic. Took a class called rhetoric, like how to be persuasive and avoid being persuaded yourself. And just turns out if you take 6 years of your life and study other people who have totally different beliefs than you, all of a sudden you start questioning your own beliefs. And that's what happened to me in my last semester. I decided, this wasn't for me. I stepped away from seminary just because I needed time to think. I actually entered into ghost hunting shortly thereafter. I was pretty into it for a couple of years, and just as time kind of went on, I began to doubt more and more and more and more. I don't know what point I became a skeptic. It just kind of happened, and here I am. So that's the short version of my story from what I told last time. If you're interested enough, go watch 2 videos ago for the more full story. But yeah, today I wanted to talk about ghost hunting, and this is specifically for skeptics. I'm also going to put on my timer because if I don't, I will ramble for about an hour and a half. I also, for me, I know most of you guys here are Canadians. You're a different time zone than me. It is 9 o'clock here. And I have ADHD and my medication has worn off. So this is ADHD, Jon. I am all over the place. And I will probably slur my words and ramble. Don't judge me. It'll be fine. We'll get through this. So timer's on, so we're good to go. But I kind of want to start off a good chunk of this presentation is going to be tracing the history of ghosts. And it's going to be specifically from a like Western European mindset, because that's just the society we live in today, right? There's all sorts of other rich cultures that have their own ideas about ghosts. Unfortunately, we just don't have time to talk about those. And for the most part, they're not really relevant to like our experience as ghost hunters do their thing. Um, and also, I'm going to talk about why modern day ghost hunting doesn't quite work. And we're going to kind of look over a few of the different techniques that they use. And I want to stop here and say, like, why? Like, why the heck are we talking about this? I get it, it's October, it's spooky season. But for me, I am passionate not about dismissing people's beliefs, not about telling people that they're wrong. That doesn't interest me. What I'm interested in is uniting the two fields. Like I really want skeptics to get out there with people in the paranormal community and work with them for multiple reasons. One, what if we're wrong? It's possible. Ghosts could exist. I don't think so, but it's possible, right? And if we stay in our own bubble, we'll never learn. But two, a lot of these people really want help. I think ghost hunters have value. I think that they are, for the most part, absolutely great human beings. There's a bad apple in every bunch. There's bad apples with skeptics too, right? But they're very wonderful people, and I just think skeptics need to spend more time breaking through echo chambers and get out of our own freaking echo chambers, right? So that's why I want to talk about this. So you guys will be more knowledgeable, probably more knowledgeable than your average ghost hunter as well. And that way you can go out and have conversations with them about this kind of stuff. That's my great hope. Or otherwise, just hang out for the ride. That's fine too. But we're going to talk about history, and then we're going to get into like modern day ghost hunting. And I've got a couple of my ghost hunting friends here, which I'm really excited about. But this presentation is for you skeptics mostly, but I'm glad my paranormal friends are here as well. Um, so we're gonna push through this, right? This is a much longer presentation. Each slide I could probably do like an hour long presentation on. So we're gonna run through this, and I'm not gonna talk about every single point on my slide. So if you want to take a picture or if you want my presentation afterwards, if you want my sources that I cite, please reach out. I would love to provide those for you. So we're going to jump through several thousand years in a few minutes. So hang tight. Uh, I've always been curious about how ghosts kind of change over history. I think a lot of people make the assumption that the way that human beings experienced alleged ghosts is all the same, right? Nighttime apparitions, incorporeal, uh, things of that nature, right? But it very much isn't. And in fact, if you go to different cultures today, depending on the culture, ghosts look totally different, have different points of existing. Some exist because that's just what they do. Like they live with us in our own world, right? Like our ancestors visit us every day, and that's just part of their religion and culture. Others ghosts exist because they have like unfulfilled desires, which is very similar to some Western European thought as well. But it has always been very interesting to me how much ghosts have changed over the years, and I wonder why that would be. But in Greco-Roman times, which is like really like the first place in terms of like Western culture we can point at where we see a ghost. I think it was Pliny the Younger made this. He wrote down that ghosts tend to be bound to the earth by chains, and he actually gave a example of this old man who had died in his house and had like an unfulfilled wish, and he would only appear when the sun set and he would scream and he would be bound to chains and he couldn't leave his house. And until they did the proper rites to actually bury him, he wouldn't go away. He appeared from dawn to dusk. Kind of fascinating. You also have this idea of ghosts kind of being these incorporeal, um, almost like leaves that the ghosts would people would see the ghost, they'd be kind of blowing through the trees in the wind. And the Greeks actually believed in Hades, like the afterlife, that's what souls did. They just kind of were blown around like leaves. after the Greco-Roman times, after the fall of Rome, really during Rome, but after the fall of Rome, the Catholic Church predominantly took over, and for thousands of years here, we're going to be seeing ghosts through the lens of Christianity in particular. I'm going to fly a lot quicker through these. In the medieval times, this is interesting. For about 1,000 years, which is a huge chunk of human lore, ghosts were actually thought to not be incorporeal. They thought that they were actually physical. So like a ghost could come up and like shake your hand. A ghost could knock stuff over using like physical, like their physical body. There wasn't this idea that ghosts were like, just like purely spirit. Now you do find like some anecdotes, but by and large, ghosts tend to be physical. Um, and they often were viewed as like a like they were not settled in purgatory. So in Catholicism at the time, you had heaven, hell, and then you kind of have like a middle ground for purgatory, where you had to be purged of your sins in order to enter heaven. And that's often why ghosts walked around the earth, was because they were restless in purgatory. So I find that so interesting that for a huge chunk of Western European history, ghosts were completely different, to the point like we probably wouldn't even recognize them if somebody was talking about them. In the Renaissance, you had the Protestant Reformation. The idea of purgatory was purged, if you will, huh? And so they believed that you could only go to heaven or hell. So ghosts are kind of viewed as demonic. If you ever watched Ghost Adventures, they would agree everything's demonic, right? Then we kind of get into the age of reason, which was just a few hundred years ago. Ghosts were on the decline. Interestingly, from what I have read in my sources, not experiences of ghosts, but by and large, people were beginning to believe that ghosts were kind of internal, like a thought process of the mind. David Hume, like a famous philosopher, actually suggested that people were experiencing ghosts due to some kind of mind trick. He didn't actually think ghosts were real, and he actually believed that you can completely remove the supernatural using enough empirical data and using science, which I think would, for most skeptics, that kind of aligns, right? But this is the big era right here where ghosts take off. Just the romance age of the 1800s, uh, ghosts become a basic part of everybody's life. Uh, there are instances where a white dog will be walking down the street and the newspaper will just report it as, hey, there's a ghost, just a ghost dog. And it'll show up in the newspaper and no one will think twice about it, right? Ghosts are just so prevalent in everybody's life. It is a complete 180 from the prior era, the Age of Reason. And the big development of this era is spiritualism. If you haven't heard of spiritualism, it is the genesis of modern day ghost hunting. There's some stuff that's different, but a lot of things you could point to and say, okay, why people do the things they do in the paranormal community, you can point at spiritualism, specifically the Fox sisters. So, what the Fox sisters would do, they would sit in a room, turn the lights down low. Of course, there weren't electrical lights for most of the time, so they would be using things like candles, but they would blow out a few candles. They would gather together in like your classic seance, right? They would hold hands and then they would call forth spirits. And the spirits would show up, and it would very much look like your modern day psychic medium um, seance, where they would ask for ghosts to come, spirits, typically ancestors or people who knew the people present, and they would ask all sorts of questions. Uh, who is here with us? Can you knock once for yes if you're here, or knock twice for no if you're not? Which is a silly question. You won't believe how often that gets asked on paranormal investigations. If you're not here, knock twice for no. I've asked it before, like a ding dong. But when you think about today's like modern uh, seances, they look exactly like while the Fox sisters were doing it. They came up with the concept of doing knocks. They came up with the concept of that ghost rap on the walls. And when you look at like modern TV shows like that, that's one of the primary things that's occurring in modern TV shows. They constantly hear knocks. bumps and things of that nature. But prior to the Fox sisters, outside of like a few anecdotes here or there, ghosts were just not known to do that. Ghosts didn't knock on the walls. Ghosts didn't do like answer questions, things like that. They very much interacted directly with human beings. The Fox sisters really came up with all of this stuff. They came up with the idea of seances. There's a theory that they, or a hypothesis that they were influenced by the Rumi, and got some of their ideas from that. But really, where it came from is where they were playing games as a kid. And we know this because they admitted that they were frauds. Yikes. So they admitted that they learned a lot of their techniques from when they were kids playing tricks on their mother. They would take like an apple and bounce it on the floor and trick their mom into thinking like a ghost was in the house. And they would do all sorts of things like that. And they would claim that ghosts could only come out at nighttime. Well, Harry Houdini, I'm sure we are all very familiar with that, in some of his investigation into, which kind of occurs after this era, but still, there's very much spiritualists still around during his era. Some of his investigation into seance and things, he realized that people are doing this in the dark because you can get away with more. So the Fox sisters would often place plants in the audience. They would, and not literal plants, but people that are in and on the gig, right? They would place people all around the room who would be making the knock. So they would move furniture, things of that nature. People be on the other side of the wall making noises, doing your ooh, uh, things like that, right? They'd have chains sometimes that they would use. And you could get away with that if you're doing it in the dark, not so much in the light. And so I often have conversations with ghost hunters, like, why do we investigate at nighttime? Like, what is the purpose of that? And you get some answers. Sometimes you'll get like, oh, it's the witching hour, the energy is more prevalent at nighttime. And I'm always, citations needed. I ask more questions. And what we usually wind up with is, well, it's been said. You get that kind of generic response, or they say. And I don't know who they is, but you never can like get to an answer, right? Because a lot of this is unfortunately folklore, but I can trace modern ghost hunting and the idea that we investigate at nighttime, the way we do question and answer sessions, even like modern modern spirit medium, the modern spirit medium movement, you can trace it all to the Fox sisters. There are accounts of like ancient tribes and things like that doing a type of mediumship to like communicate with their ancestors and things of that nature. But modern day mediumship, where people summon spirits, identify the spirits by asking the audience questions, and then giving the audience messages and things like that, is very scarcely found prior to the Fox sisters, which I always find curious. And again, is that because this stuff isn't real, or did they discover a way to do it that we just didn't know about before? I have my opinion, but for the most part, you can point at these guys. And what I want to point out, and I try to point out to a lot of ghost hunters, is they were frauds. They were taking people's money. They were leading people astray. They were taking advantage of people that had lost loved ones, that that were just looking for answers, that just missed people in their life, right? And they were taking their money. And the Fox sisters, in a lot of ways, I would say 90%. We're going to talk about some other stuff, but 90% of ghost hunting is built on the Fox sisters. And they're con artists. They're liars. And we know this because they admitted to it. And people like Harry Houdini can replicate exactly what they did. And that's a big problem, right? And that doesn't mean that modern day hunting is necessarily incorrect, but it is worth questioning current techniques, right? So after the Fox sisters, you have a lot of organizations like Harry Price, SPR. The Harry Houdini kind of starts to make his way around this time. But really, what happens during this period, especially in the early 1900s, is the rise of what we think of today as modern day science. What do I mean by that? Because science has been around since 1600s, give or take. When I say modern day, What I'm referring to is the idea of falsification, which all skeptics in here, I hope, are aware of. But that's trying to disprove ideas instead of proving ideas. This was put about by a guy named Karl Popper, and it revolutionized science. You can point to the great second scientific revolution. You could point at Karl Popper and his idea of falsifying, trying to disprove your ideas, not trying to prove a belief, as kickstarting science and starting great scientific revolutions all around. Einstein, for example, Popper was influenced by Einstein, but um, Einstein also was influenced very much by Popper as well, because he tried to disprove his methods until he literally had no choice but to accept things like general relativity, special relativity, etc. What you don't see is the adaptation for paranormal research to that new way of thinking. And I often, when I talk to ghost hunters, and I felt like this too, man, like when I used to do this and I just truly believed in ghosts and the afterlife, I felt like I was on like the edge of like a frontier. I really felt like I was doing something that no one had ever done before, that I was going into places and that just I was on the forefront of science. And upon doing more research into what science is, I never realized that the techniques that I was using are 150, 200 years old. Like they're antiquated and they've been replaced because I was trying to prove my beliefs, right? And what comes with that? Bias. If I'm trying to prove my beliefs, I will find all the evidence I need to believe, right? It's just going to happen. No matter what my belief is, if I need to prove something that I believe, I will find it. It's how the brain works. But two, even if you try to eliminate as much bias as you can never fully prove something. So just give an example. If I wanted to prove that all crows were black, how many crows would I have to count? A lot, right? Like a lot of crows. And I don't have time for that. I also don't have an ability to count all the prior crows that came before, and I don't have the ability to count all the crows that are going to be born in the future. But how many crows does it take to disprove that all crows are black? One. And so that's the power of falsification, where you try to disprove your beliefs instead of trying to prove it. And so during this era, you really saw the rise of what we call pseudoscience. And that's something that looks like science. You're using gadgets, maybe you're even using scientific terms, but you're not really following the scientific method. One of the big guys that came out of this era is J.B. Ryan. And I live like 5 minutes from the Ryan Institute, which is kind of cool. But J.B. Ryan was big, like very influential in creating the field of parapsychology. So essentially, a lot of psychologists were like psychology at the time was really at the forefront of science at the time, and it was being developed into uh, what we now know today as like a really good science. But back then, you had guys like Freud and Carl Jung who said some questionable things and weren't necessarily scientific. But a lot of these guys, these psychologists who were trained by Jung, trained by Freud, come out of that and they start asking questions about, well, what are ghosts? Or what is psi? Can you have telepathy between two individuals? And they start asking really interesting questions. The problem is that they continue with Carl Jung, with Sigmund Freud's techniques, which are pseudoscientific techniques. Psychology today is very much a science and uses falsification, but not so much back then. Science had split from psychology and was starting to falsify. Psychology hadn't caught up yet. These guys left thinking, doing the best they knew, right? I mean, they could have done more research, of course, but they took what they knew, very smart guys, and applied again old techniques to old problems, really. But they pioneered what's called parapsychology. Parapsychology looks really good, right? Like if you aren't sure about how stats work, like statistics, how science work, on the front, it looks really good. Um, and JB Ryan was trying his best with what he had to prove or disprove the existence of ghosts. But the problem that JB Ryan had is he was very selective. in, in his data. He did a really, really good job where if he had a hypothesis that he just totally disagreed with, for example, he didn't believe that ghosts were external. He didn't think that they were spirits walking around. He would do so much research into this and like do really good reports and do really good stats showing how ghosts may not be external. But then he believed that ghosts are internal and not like Hume, but he actually believed that it's like we have a psychic gift that can manifest spirit presence, and that's where ghosts are coming from. So that's where the idea of like poltergeist and things like that come from. Someone who believes a poltergeist is external, they think a poltergeist is literally throwing stuff, right? Like an actual ghost is like throwing things. J.B. Ryan believed it was internal. He believed that something about the person had like a psychic gift, maybe like a child or a teenager that was upset, could literally toss things around the room using psychic gifts and not even realize what they were doing. A skeptic would say, I've, I've never seen things tossed around the room by themselves. Like, can you show me? Um, and those are kind of like the three schools of thought, right? So J.B. Ryan, I think, did a better job. And parapsychology, for the most part, does a better job. But a better job doesn't mean a good job, unfortunately. And it's still not the best way to approach truth. And really, we get into modern day. Let me check my time. Okay. I'm behind and it's fine. So let's move fast. So modern kind of pre-TV age, you this looks very similar to today. You get a guy who I think is the most important in this place, not the Fox sisters. That's definitely that is a very strange looking Fox sister. I clearly messed that title up, but that's fine. No, this is Constantine Raldova. Um, So there was a Dutch artist who was very interested in listening to birds. And I get it, man. That's all I do. I have a bird feeder out my window and I love listening to birds and watching birds. It's it's what happened during COVID and it has stuck with me. Don't know why. Sure love birds. Uh, but this artist decided that he wanted to leave out a recorder in his garden. And he wanted to like just capture bird songs and listen to them. But one day he went and like got the recorder and he was surprised because he thought he heard his mother on the recorder calling his name. And he heard other voices too. Uh, I personally, if I left a recorder out in a garden for sometimes like a day or longer and I heard strange voices, I don't know if I would jump to ghost. I would probably think that there were people walking around outside, especially when you're not watching the recorder, right? But this artist decided that no, like that was really his mother like reaching out and talking on the tape, and that the other voices were also ghosts. And just to be clear, I am not aware from what I have tried to find, and I've dug deep, and I cannot find a point prior to this, and I believed it occurred in the 1940s, 1946, and radio and recording mechanisms have been around at this point for several decades. And I can't find any other point where an alleged spirit has communicated through tape. It hasn't happened or communicate through any other possible way. So I also find that curious is how did spirits figure this out, right? Like why are they just now doing this in the 40s? But Konstantin Radova runs off with this idea, and he comes up with ITC. I always forget what that stands for. Some interdimensional transcommunication, I believe. And he has this idea that spirits are able to record their voice on magnetic tape because he can show you. You can go into his lab, he can play audio, and you can hear like interesting things that sound like voices. There is an effect called pareidolia, and if you have ever listened to any of my presentations, is one of the things I talk about the most, where our brains, they are wired to make sense out of meaningless things. It's an evolutionary trait. It's how we survived, right? We give meaning to meaningless events. And that's exactly what pareidolia is. if you ever see any smiley faces, which if you want to throw me some smiley faces and some hearts in the chat, that'd be great because I get to see those. But those smiley faces and those hearts are not literal hearts, nor are they literal smiley faces. But our brains connect the dots. And when we see that shape, that red shape, and when we see the yellow shape with the two eyes and the mouth, our brain interprets that as, well, that's a face. The exact same thing can happen with audio too. And I believe that's what was happening to Konstantin Roundavat. I don't have any other evidence to the contrary, right? But that idea took off, and that's where we get something called electronic voice phenomena. If you ever watch like a ghost hunting show and they're walking around with recorders and trying to record things, and when they do their question and answer sessions where they ask a ghost to make a response or they ask questions, that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to capture um, ghosts talking to the recorder. This comes straight from Konstantin Radova. And so I want to move into like what does ghost hunting look like today? Uh, my favorite clip from all of Ghost Adventures makes me laugh every time when he yells, "Did someone just scratch me?" But there are two TV shows that I'm going to talk about that I think influenced ghost hunting more than anything. Outside of the Fox sisters, there's two TV shows. One of these is Ghost Adventures. And so, for my paranormal friends, like I am not knocking you when I say this, if you are in fit in this category, but I often talk to like paranormal enthusiasts, and they're really just looking for experiences. They're not necessarily trying to like prove or disprove ghostly phenomena. And they're really just trying to like have like an interesting experience of some kind. And so this is really like I'm not saying that Ghost Adventures necessarily popularized this idea, but if you ever watch the show, I'm one of the few people that like I freaking love Ghost Adventures, not because I believe in ghosts, because I don't, not because I think what they do is legitimate, I don't, because it is hilarious. Like I love the show. Zach Baggins makes me laugh. Ridiculous human being, ridiculous show. It's great. Great on all the bad reasons. Not great for any reason that a skeptic should like, but wow, great show to make me laugh. And I'm not, again, not making fun of the guy. It's a funny show. Um, but they run around and they're hyped up and they're really just trying to have experiences. And they may walk around with equipment and things like that. But the whole point is to have a sense of self and to sense things around you. You'll often see paranormal investigation teams use psychic mediums, which is someone who claims to be able to communicate with a spirit or psychic empaths, and that's someone who and there's a couple of different definitions for this and I've heard different people tell me different things. Some people believe that like they can have like a feeling of a place, that they could pick up on the energy of a place. And when we say energy, I I also have never really heard like a good definition of what that is, right? Like science, we know of a potential and kinetic energy, and that's it. And so I'm still waiting for like a good definition of that. I just don't have a good one. I've never seen a good one. But they believe that they could pick up like the energy of the room and kind of like sense emotions and things of that nature. There's another kind of psychic empath who they believe that they can actually sense like the emotions and feelings of the alleged spirits in the place. I know somebody else who like she can walk into a location and she believes that she like if like a murder occurred in a particular part of the room, she can feel like the emotion of the murder. So that's kind of the different definitions of psychic empaths. But often these are very much like experience based. There's another kind of investigator who I feel like is I don't want to say feel, it's based on my own research, uh, very heavily influenced by the TV show Ghost Hunters. And in fact, that's kind of where we get our term, as far as I'm aware, for ghost hunting is from these guys. So the first couple of seasons of Ghost Hunters isn't bad in terms of research. I still don't agree with their methods, but they tried as best as they could, not being scientists themselves, to do like a proper investigation as best as they knew how. Got a little weird as time went on, and they kind of went more towards the ghost adventurers way. But these guys, I think you could ask almost anybody in the paranormal field, maybe not as much today, but up to a point, people were influenced by these guys. These were the first guys on TV, and they were just a really big deal. They were a big deal to me. I mean, they're why I got into ghost hunting. But at the end of the day, they really are using pseudoscientific techniques. They're still using the techniques of the Victorian age. They're still using the pre-Popper techniques that can lead us towards actual truth. And they will say like they're actually trying to prove or disprove ghosts, right? Like they're going beyond just feelings, and but they'll use like science gadgets, which we'll get into, or science gadgets, scientific gadgets. But really they try to be skeptical, but I find it's a pseudo skepticism. Often they will say like they will debunk something that's just absolutely can't be a ghost, as if that gives any other claims they may have extra credence. I hope that makes sense. So sometimes I'll watch on TV and I will see them pick up something and then they're able to debunk it, which good, right? Like you found the solution. And when I say debunk, I don't necessarily want them like I want truth to be whatever it is. If they're able to prove ghosts, I think that's awesome. I want ghosts to exist. I don't want to die and disappear and not experience new things. I would love to be a ghost, like sincerely from the bottom of my heart. Like I want ghosts to be real. Um, but they'll debunk something and later like it's like that builds up credibility, so later when they make claims without evidence, it somehow gives them the ability to that somehow gives them proof that their claims, because they debunk this other claim, that does not give you evidence that your other claims are any stronger, right? I hope that makes sense. Again, ADHD medication is great, and 9 o'clock it is gone out of my system. But those guys are huge, right? Like they are the main reason that most people ghost hunt. Like you could point straight to them. The third kind is what we were getting back to about JB Ryan. Again, I appreciate my parapsychological friends. They try really hard to use stats and things of that nature, but the problem with that is they're not usually able to replicate their findings. And they'll often say like, well, you can't put ghosts in test tubes, psi and things like that are it kind of comes and goes. It can be inaccurate and things of that nature. But as if anybody in here is involved in any way with science, there's a whole lot of things that we can't replicate in the way they mean it. We can't go out and make the plates move in the earth, but we understand how plate tectonics work. And so replication means something very different to us. It doesn't necessarily mean doing the exact thing over and over again. It just means when you make a prediction, every time, if something is true, every time you do the experiment, it should line up in some way. That's what making a prediction and replicating something is. And unfortunately, parapsychologists, interestingly, just can't replicate. Really, I've personally never seen any replication for any of their ideas. I'm not saying it's not out there. I just personally have not seen it. It tends to lack in parapsychology. Again, because most of their approaches, they're trying to prove their ideas. They're not trying to disprove it. And oh man, I wish Kenny wasn't in here because I forgot to delete this slide, but that's okay. Then you have your science-based researchers. Two presentations you've been in a week, Kenny. What am I going to, oh man. But anyways, there's science-based researchers who are in the field. I often hear people say, well, there are no paranormal or professional paranormal investigators. Well, I know one, and he just happens to be in this room. Uh, with actually someone whose job, whose profession is doing actual science-based research into mysterious claims. And these people, you can ask Kenny, he's in the room. I do it as a hobby, so I am not a professional when it comes to it. But science-based research, they want to go where the evidence takes them. They're not trying to be right. They're not trying to disprove people just because they want their belief system to work. They want to go where the evidence takes them. And so far, the evidence has taken them to that ghosts unfortunately don't exist. but you go where the evidence leads. And maybe one day we'll have enough evidence we can come up with a scientific experiment that does show there's life after death. And I think that would be great. Um, but very rare in the scientific world. And so, real briefly, because I know we got about 10 minutes left, so we're doing good. But I kind of wanted to go over like what a typical investigation looks like. And this is not like, just to be clear, this is not every single paranormal investigation team out there. I am not throwing shade at, every single team. This is just what I often see. And I would say this is what it looks like most of the time. There's some teams out there that are doing really great. If you want me to name three, I don't think these teams are scientific in the literal sense of the word, but I think they're doing okay. I would say CPRI. I would say they're probably the best that I've seen out there. Um, APS, they do a good job of not just saying everything's haunted, and they're trying their best. They actually actively involve actual skeptics in investigations, and that's the way forward, right? And three would be the Ghost Guild. They're not so interested in proving or disproving ghosts. They're kind of mostly all about researching, like doing historical research, but they will call me and they will call others. I know they've reached out to Kenny before, I believe. Well, yeah, because we Ghost Guild did an investigation up in Philly with Kenny, but they like when if something strange happens, they don't just stop and say, "Well, can't explain that, must be a ghost." They try their best to understand what it is, and they will often reach out to skeptics. I'm sure there's other teams out there. I don't personally know of them, but most of the time, what you see when a team wants to go somewhere, they will pay sometimes hundreds of dollars. Places like Ohio State Reformatory, when I went, it cost $1,000 to rent for a night. And that's split up amongst the group, but you can see how this is not cheap. It's not cheap. So you often will pay just bukus of money. Some teams have contracts with like certain historical societies to investigate places, and some other teams will also do private residences, which has its own problematic thing because many times people who are having issues in a home, usually there's some kind of mental health issue, and the last thing they need is a bunch of ghost hunters in their house telling the place is haunted or has demons or something like that, right? Like you need to try to figure out the physical before you move to the metaphysical. um and that's not philosophical metaphysical, that's how they use it. Spiritual, metaphysical things. But what most investigations look like, you pay your money to go to the place, you drive for hours. I have driven 8.5 hours, I believe, to Ohio. It's the farthest place I've ever driven. You drive a really long way, you pay a lot of gas, you get a hotel or an Airbnb, and you can kind of see how you don't want to feel like you're wasting your time, right? Because you were paying thousands of dollars, and that doesn't include the equipment, which some of these things like the K2 EMF meter, if you go to archive.org, you go to about year 2000 or so, archive.org, and you look up the K2, it's just a meter. It's something that people are using to find electrical, live electricity in their walls and stuff. You go back to archive.org and look up the website Post Ghost Hunters. The company has completely pivoted to selling K2s specifically for ghost hunters. When I say K2, that's that meter on my screen where it says EMF meter. It's used to detect electromagnetic frequencies. Um, and it's often used by electricians to find live wires and things in the wall. But even that company that makes that has completely pivoted to just targeting ghost hunters, which is fascinating to me because they make more money that way, right? Like they can raise the prices of their product and they can make more money. And in a lot of ways, they're fleecing people. But this equipment costs a ton, a lot of money. And so yeah, this happened to me, right? I'm not saying anything that didn't happen to me. There was an incentive for me to feel like I was doing something meaningful because I was spending so much freaking money and time to go do this stuff. And so, yeah, like there was kind of like this incentive, like you really wanted to believe you were doing something meaningful. Most ghost hunters will and paranormal investigators will establish a baseline without really understanding that that takes a lot of time. You can't just establish a baseline 15 minutes prior to an investigation or even an hour prior to an investigation. You can't do it. That's not a baseline, right? They also typically turn the lights off. A question I have had sincerely, this is a question I've had since the very beginning of my ghost hunting days, is I've never understood why we turn the lights off and then pull out our flashlights. I don't get it. Just leave the lights on. And I've heard different things about why. They'll argue like, well, if you turn the lights off, it enhances like your ears and your other senses. If you turn the lights off, maybe there's like a shadow ghost that you wouldn't normally be able to see. I mean, and all that is, I get where they're coming from, but our eyesight is our best sense. It's what drives us. When we hear something, what do? We look at it, right? Because that's what drives us as human beings. That this is our primary way of exploring the world. And so, in my humble opinion, turn the lights on if you want to look for ghosts. But some tools that they'll use, like they'll use the EMF meter. I also have the REM pod here. Um, and this is a device that if something gets close to it, it lights up. It's actually called a junior theremin, which you can buy for extremely cheap. The theremin was originally an instrument. If you ever saw like in the 70s where they would kind of like wave their hand, it'd go woo, woo, woo. You're welcome for that. I'm glad you're all muted because I don't have to hear your boos and throwing tomatoes for my voice. But the junior theremin is essentially like a child's toy. And that's what's inside of these REM pods. You can get them. I've seen them for as low as $15, but that's without like an enclosing and a kit. One was shown to me at a conference last weekend in Skeptic Camp. I think it was like $30. But the REM pods sometimes like can go for 150, 200 bucks. And they're just like a 15 to $30 piece of equipment that you can buy off Amazon. So again, these companies, they have to know what they're doing. They have to understand they're making this stuff and they're inflating the price by several hundreds of a percentage and are making money off people, which sucks. Another thing is Spirit Box and the Estes method. I won't jump into the Estes method. And the Spirit Box is essentially a radio that just sweeps through the channels. And I've heard different ideas of how this works. I've been told that the original person who made it actually thought that like the spirits could like manipulate radio waves that are coming through the spirit box, and that's how ghosts can talk to us. And I've heard other things too. I mean, it's sweeping through a live radio station. It's sweeping through AM and FM radio. And I assume you guys have AM and FM up in Canada. I don't know if you call it something different or you have different frequencies. Whatever, man, you Canadians. Um, but when it sweeps through the radio, I mean, you're picking up live radio, and your words are going to come through the radio. And statistically, at some point, you're going to hear something meaningful, even without our brains trying to make sense of the world around us. You're just going to hear a word that makes sense and fits. But there's all sorts of different gadgets that are used. There's also a lot of mediumship, like I talked about before, and maybe mediumship is real. Again, I've never seen any evidence to suggest that psi abilities are real. I cannot tell you how much I hope that they are. I would love the idea of being able to explore the world in a different way, or maybe even healing people without having to use like chemicals and medicine and things like that. Unfortunately, I've never come across evidence. I hope it's real, but I don't think so, and I'm skeptical about that. But with that being said, even if mediumship was real, and we could prove that mediumship was real and authentic, it cannot lead to the discovery of ghosts. Why? Because there's a trust component. When someone's standing in a room and they're doing a reading about what they feel around them, we have to trust that they're telling the truth, that what they're getting and sensing around the world about them is 100% accurate, that the ghost or whatever they're talking to, it's being 100% honest, and it's also has the ability to be 100% accurate. And it's just again, it's a form of hearsay. It's a form of testimony. So at best, if mediumship is real, it cannot lead to truth. It is only hearsay. And there's my alarm that's telling me I am rambling. So I've got 2 slides left, including this one. So we'll push through. I hope you guys get that, right? Because for me, I don't really care about debunking mediumship. I'm not that interested in it. I just want people to think a little bit better. And for me, even if mediumship was real, it doesn't lead to any kind of truth, unfortunately. In the same way that I can't trust my eyes, my ears, smell when I'm doing an investigation, because the mind plays tricks, so too we have to assume with psi abilities. And that's what's beautiful about science. You don't have to trust anything with science, right? As much as possible, there is zero trust in science. If you have to say, trust me, you're not doing science. Science is true because it has physical evidence and just buku's amount of just volumes of data that supports a hypothesis. And that's when it turns into a theory, right? We don't have to trust people to tell us the truth. We can look it up ourselves. That's why science is so beautiful. There are a few ghost hunters, and I love everyone that tries to do this, that will often use pseudoscience, use the methods where they ask questions and things of that nature. And if something strange happens, then they'll switch into a scientific perspective and then try to debunk what happened. And I applaud that. Anytime you use science, anytime you're trying to disprove anything, I'm here for you, right? Like big about that, all about it. But you can kind of see a problem, right? If you're using ghost hunting methods and then strange things are occurring, and then you can turn around and then use science to debunk them, and sometimes you don't know, right? I would say a lot of times you don't know. You can't debunk it. You aren't really doing anything. You're kind of caught in this vicious cycle where you're using pseudoscience, and you're using, unfortunately, like about 200-year-old investigative methods, and then you turn around and use more modern investigative methods to try to discover something. You're just going in a circle. I would argue maybe just use science and actual forensic investigative methods to start off with. And this is why people like Kenny, people like Ben, uh, and myself, we try to use science to investigate strange claims. One of the things that I would suggest, especially if you want to talk with paranormal investigators, is to encourage them to investigate claims, not places. Often I'll talk to my friends and they'll say, "Hey, let's go on an investigation." Cool. What are we investigating? Um, we're going to investigate Ohio State Reformatory. Awesome. And that's where it stops, right? Like, what about Ohio State Reformatory? Uh, or like they don't investigate actual individual occurrences as they happen. And they don't try to replicate those occurrences because that's science, right? You look at what is going on and then you try to replicate it and you ask questions based on that particular thing. But most ghost hunters will typically just show up at a location and maybe they'll hear a story. They might hear that a lady was walking down the stairs at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but then they'll show up at 9 o'clock at night on a Saturday and go to the kitchen and set up a REM pod. But they're not investigating the thing that actually, like the actual claim. You don't see that in science, right? If someone's doing an investigation for why tooth decay happens in 35-year-olds more often than 40-year-olds, well, they don't start off with going to a house and looking up an electromagnetic frequency, right? Like you don't start there. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You start with the teeth and you might eventually move there. Like, you might eventually go to some other thing, but you start off with the actual claim. Uh, the if you have ever done a scientific investigation of a paranormal claim, the overwhelming majority of the research occurs way before you ever step foot in a place. You're digging through magazine articles. You're digging through newspaper articles from the time that it occurred. You're researching people to see if these people even existed. You're looking at testimony that occurred at the time. You're looking at what other people have researched and trying to make correlations with that. It takes a long time. It's exhausting. If you're doing appropriate investigation for just a specific claim, I'm doing an investigation right now about a claim at an orphanage in Gettysburg. And I haven't even got to the ghost part yet. it takes so much time to do a proper investigation before you even step foot into the place. Um, and finally, if you're going to try to do paranormal investigation, I suggest that you try to solve a mystery. You don't try to debunk because that assumes that ghosts aren't real, right? And maybe they are. But you also don't try to prove your belief. Start with solving the mystery and going for wherever the truth takes you. Use the scientific method. Come up with a hypothesis. Come up with a way to do an experiment. Collect your data. Determine what's going to be data, right? And make controls as much as you can. And afterwards, sit down and look at your data and try to come up with a conclusion and repeat and repeat and repeat. Don't stop repeating. And you get other people to repeat it too. That's something I find so interesting too, is that a lot of time investigators, they don't keep going back to the same place over and over and over and over again. They may visit it one or two times, and that's it. And so that would be my suggestion for anyone that wants to do actual a paranormal investigation, or if you want to help anybody, like if you want to get with other paranormal teams and like have conversations with them, this is what I would suggest to you. But that's it for me. This is my social media nonsense. I'm still working on my website and still have not created a YouTube video yet. Even though I think last time I was like, I swear, guys, I'll have a YouTube video. I have been too dang busy doing other things in the both the paranormal and skeptical world. So maybe next time I come, I'll have a YouTube video. But please, like, if anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them if I can.
Well, John, your ramblings are fantastic. You can
I
keep
hope
on
so.
rambling.
I'm glad it made sense to you. I don't know if it made sense to me.
No, yeah, it was amazing. And we had a kind of a series of this topic of investigations and everything. And yeah, I think we close with a golden key here because yeah, it was amazing. So no, Jim has a question. So Jim,
Okay. One thing about your uh, the investigations of, say, an orphan something thing at an orphanage that reminded
Mhm.
me about the uh, investigations at the residential schools in Canada about the claims that there were a zillion deaths from um, well, carelessness at best, if not yeah, and sort of using something like stuff like ground penetrating radar to look for unmarked graves and stuff. Nothing, nothing really um, paranormal or supernatural, but just a claim of something. Well, pretty much a crime.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Investigating a long ago crime, and to what extent are you doing the same sort of thing?
I mean, I have never investigated something that wound up being a crime.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe I will one day. I have no idea. That has not been an experience of mine. No, in this particular case for the orphanage, it was just a claim that there was a dungeon in the orphanage where they kept children. And I'm just having a hard time finding that that was actually like a historical event. The newspapers at the time, as far as what I can tell from so far, just do not mention this dungeon. Um, I can trace it back to a tour company in 1992. That's the oldest I can find it. And the same tour company still runs tours at the place today. But even like almost any article like references this tour company.
Yeah.
It seems like that's where the genesis of it is. So, in that case, I don't think it's a crime. We know that the lady wasn't great, but you know, just because you weren't great, it doesn't mean you get to have just anything thrown at you just
Yeah.
automatically believed, you know? So, no
Like
crimes yet.
like a dungeon under a pizza parlor.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know if I would touch that one. And honestly, like if it ever got into a crime, like at that point, like I am not a professional investigator. Really, like somebody else who is a professional probably should take that up at that point, like law enforcement or something like that. That's not something that I am educated enough to do. So,
Yeah.
any other questions? Thank you.
Well, since no one raised a hand, I'm going to ask a question. It will be a little
Sure.
longer. You mentioned spiritualism, and I come from Brazil, so it's very strong there, and
Yeah.
candomblé, umbanda, and all sorts of rituals that they have. And I grew up in this environment,
Hmm.
and well, I have people very close to me that believe that, oh, when I entered the room, and that actually happened, I went to hospital to visit uh, the father of a friend that had a heart attack, and he said that when I came into the room, I brought he had an Indian chief that was his guide, or I don't remember the name,
Hmm.
and he said that the chief entered with me. And I just looked at it, okay, where is he, right? And then what's going on? And
Yeah.
it's someone that I respected. He passed away a few years ago, and he was very intelligent. It wasn't
Yeah.
someone that I could discard. He was the vice president of one of the largest marketing companies in Brazil. I known him for, at that time, 15 years. And yeah, so how has it happened to you? How do you approach something like that? Because well, it's in his mind, right? I
Yeah.
hope there was no Indian coming with me there, but
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, because it could have been, right? I mean, we don't know. It's kind of an unprovable claim, right? So for me, I think it's important. You pointed out something I think very important. One, he was intelligent, right? And I think as skeptics, we sometimes, I'm not saying anyone here is guilty of this. It's just, I think sometimes we think we're the smart kids on the block, and those idiots that believe in the paranormal are so dumb. It's not true. There are just I have run across so many amazing people in the paranormal community that are loving and intelligent and smart and capable, and they're absolutely wonderful people. And I don't know if you know this, but skeptics can be dumb too. And so, yeah, this idea that like, we're smart and they're not, in my experience, is just not true. And I think it's also a warning to skeptics that we can fall prey to thinking that is improper as well, right? But just because we're smart, it doesn't mean that we can't lose our critical thinking ability. With that being said, so if someone asked, like, said those things, I mean, I have a technique that I use, and it's honestly, it's nothing that I came up with. It's all from other people that I've kind of combined into my own thing. I usually just start off with asking people like, "Hey, like, can you explain to me like what you're seeing and like why is that important?" Like, because I want to understand, and I hear them out because it's important to them, right? Like, if it's important enough for them to talk to you about it, like it's important to them. So, you know what? It's important to me. I'm curious, and so I hear them out. I hear what they have to say. And then like when I feel like I've kind of gathered enough to understand as much as I can, I just ask them like, "How certain are you?" And just give me a percentage, 0 to 100. And if they say 100, by definition, they're closed-minded, right? Like that's the definition of that. If they're 100% certain of it, they're closed off. And that's a good indication that they're probably not ready to talk about that kind of thing. And that's okay, right? We're all not ready to talk about something in our life. And so I kind of usually I might explore a little bit more. But really from there I usually kind of drop the conversation. But if they give me anything else, 99 to 1, right? I do what all skeptics do, and I explore the doubt. They will typically explore the belief. I will explore the doubt. Well, why do you have a 1% disbelief? Like, let's talk about that. Like, what else could it be? Because you said you have a little bit of doubt, right? Let's talk about that. And that's when I move into the Socratic method, and we just explore their doubt together. Um, and yeah, I just kind of let them, like, they take over at that point. I don't do anything but ask questions. So
That's great.
it doesn't always lead to something, but ooh, excuse me, little burp. I don't, I'm not so interested. I mean, I am. I don't want people to have harmful belief. And what I mean by that is I don't want people to have belief that hurts themselves or others in some kind of negative way. But I'm not so interested in getting people to believe what I believe. What I'm interested in is just having people think a little bit better. And it includes me. If they think a little bit better, I truly believe at some point, like, perfect thinking leads to perfect belief, right? And when I say belief, it's about justified belief, true justified belief, which is another word for knowledge, depending on the camp of philosophy you're in. But I want people to think a little bit better, and that's it. And if they ask questions, then when people believe without evidence, they really are shackling themselves to something else. They've lost their autonomy over that particular belief. They're letting something else external of their life guide them. But if they ask questions and they doubt something, but then they arrive at that same belief, well, they arrived because they chose to, based on the preponderance of evidence. They have autonomy, they have control over their lives. And that's what I'm interested in. I hope that makes sense. So I ask questions just to be able to give people control back of that aspect of their life. That's why skepticism's so damn important to me, is autonomy.
Sure. Thank you. Kat?
Well, I was just actually going to speak to your point, Elio, as somebody who was raised with religion and whose great grandmother was declaring on the census right up until 1940 that she was a spiritualist. It's really hard to navigate those kinds of conversations when you know people and they have these beliefs. And, I was raised to believe those things, right? And so to step away from it, it's you don't tend to question what you were raised with, right? What your parents teach you, you tend to believe. And in certain cultures, it is ingrained for several generations back. So sometimes you just have to go, okay, what's the harm here? And if there is no harm, let it be. And if there is harm, then obviously step in, like Jon was saying. But it's very, very difficult when you have whole cultures, whole societies that embrace and believe with every fiber of their being. It's hard to step away from that. And like I say, I come from like this long line of people who were right into that. So I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And just to complement what happened, I'm pretty sure he only said that because he trusted me. It's
yeah,
not something that they would comment with anyone. It's because we had this long relationship. His son was my best man in my marriage. So we've known each other for a long time, and I went through the ritual, so he was comfortable enough to comment that. But at the same time, I was lost. I said, okay, so what do I do now? Right? And I
yeah.
didn't do anything. I just tried to
And all
ignore it.
spirit guides tend to be, Native American and
Yeah, and
or
in this case
Aboriginal
was
descent
native
because they're
South
ancient
America.
beings. And
Yeah.
My
Yeah, I
spirit
mean,
guide is a Captain Morgan.
no, yours is the Kraken. We all know it's the Kraken.
That's a good one. I like that, Kenny.
yeah, I mean, I think you did the right thing. And I think what you did is important. Where if you don't know what to say, don't say anything. Just listen. Like, we don't always need to say something, especially if we don't have anything good to say. We can cause further harm. I think you pointed it out. Like, he told you that because he thought you were important and cared and trusted you. And I think you did the right thing by not saying something. I think sometimes the skeptics we talk to damn much, and when we shouldn't be, right? So I mean, it sounds like you did the right thing. If you didn't know what to say, just that's okay. Just I think you recognized that what they had to point out with you to you was important, and who knows, that probably meant more to him than you ever realized,
Yeah,
right?
true.
Um,
I think you're right. I think there's the need sometimes for skeptics to explain stuff when they don't need to.
right.
Like we feel obligated to offer an explanation when we really don't have one. And we really should just shut up and not say anything because we just make it worse. And we see that, like we usually see that on the ghost hunter side. Like a lot of people just offer explanations that are, fabricated in their head. But sometimes skeptics do it too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
True.
I've done it before. I'm guilty of it. Just trying to over-explain something because I want to be right. I mean, I think we're all guilty of that. So, yeah, absolutely.
So anyone else? No more questions? Well, I have a few slides here, but if you have any questions, we can go back to them after I finish this.
I think
these
Melinda's
slides.
puppy has a question.
Oh, Melinda. Melinda? No?
What a lovely baby.
Oh, now that I saw it. Oh, look, I had a Bernese Mountain too. Oh, they're so lovely.
That's a big dog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just let me show here. Slide. So, well, Jon mentioned already, but if you want to contact him, you can go to linkup.com/Jon Michaels has questions, or look for Jon Michael has questions on any platform, and you can find him easily. Next month, it will be our last webinar of 2025. We'll have Adrian Hill. She'll be talking about the law of attraction, lunacy, and OCD ordeals. And I think it's going to be fun. And remember, it's going to be our last in December. It's complicated with all the holidays. So she'll be closing 2025, which was a great year for our webinars. And just a couple more slides here. So please help us spread the word. We have two websites that we work a lot with. Is Rocky Mountain Atheists. It's our atheist version, and we have a We Can Reason. That's our conference and our webinars. So we try to keep We Can Reason more focused on critical thinking and science and these events. Of course, we don't hide from anyone where we are. It's sponsored by Rocky Mountain Aces, but if you have some issue spreading the word about skepticism and you don't want to be related to Rocky Mountain Atheists, you can go to wecanreason.com. We have Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And the Rocky Mountain Atheists, we have all social media. And I know that some people find us on Meetup. And yeah, we have a big Meetup group. We also have a Facebook group. It's growing. So you just go to our Facebook page and you can find our Facebook group there. And if you can, please donate or become a member. It's just $20 per year. You can find both buttons in our sites and subscribe to our emails. We have our forms there. You can subscribe and receive. We don't send many emails. It's just 2 per week, one with our digest from the previous week and one digest also for our from our speakers. So we try to keep our audience updated with what our speakers are doing, the We Can Reason conference speakers. So we don't send that many emails. And for who is close to Calgary, we have every month our Skeptics in the Pub, every third Friday, 7 p.m. Currently, we are at the Hudson's Shaughnessy. It worked well last time, so hopefully we'll keep using this facility because it worked very well. And it always helps us to engage the community. So now, any question? Oh, we have the chat works a lot here. So is there something interesting here on the chat that I would want to mention? Okay. So
I
no.
think Kat said something very important at 10:18.
Yeah, I think I skipped Cat here. Let's see, what did she say?
I think she
Yeah.
said, "Great job, Jon." That's probably just
Wow, it was a fantastic job, Jon. It's
I'm just
not easy to do a webinar. I did one a couple of years ago. Lois is preparing one for us too. Cat had one that was very successful. We had one of the hugest audiences is Cat's webinar. It's a lot of work. We appreciate a lot what you do. And whenever we can, we'll support you and try to help you spread your word as well.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
thank you.
It's awesome.
Hopefully you'll be back. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.